Hercules was condemned before he ever proved his strength, and perhaps that is why he became a legend, because he had to be born a hero from within his own ruin. Before the monsters, the labors, and the glory, Hercules' story began as a sentence cast down from the heights of Olympus. Even before his birth, his name already weighed among the gods as a threat, a wounded pride, and an omen of strength too great to be contained. Zeus looked upon the mortal world and left there a divine seed, strong enough to change the course of men. But on Olympus, no radiance passed unseen by Hera's eyes, and her wrath recognized the danger before the child had even drawn breath. To the queen of the gods, that son was no innocent, but living proof of defiance, disorder, and heavenly humiliation. When the night of his birth arrived, the sky closed over Thebes as if the storm itself had come to collect that destiny. Hercules was born small like any other child, yet there was in his silence a weight that even the palace torches could not hide. As the cradle swayed in the half-light, Hera was already descending upon the night like a faceless curse, slow and certain. It was not ordinary hatred, but a divine will to break early what might one day dare challenge even the heavens. That was how darkness entered the boy's chamber, bringing with it serpents as test, warning, and condemnation. But before the cradle, the impossible happened before anyone could cry out, and frailty gave way to absurd strength. In the child's hands, the serpents lost their terror, and the whole room seemed to understand that this destiny would not be ordinary. At the sight of the miracle, men spoke of blessing, but the gods recognized something far more dangerous: the birth of a legend. From that instant on, Hercules ceased to be merely the son of mortal blood and began to carry the weight of a forbidden origin. Hera watched from afar and understood that her first attempt had failed, but the boy's downfall would still be built over time. The years passed and strength grew in Hercules before peace, before understanding, and before any choice of his own. Every gesture seemed greater than it should have been, as if his very body already obeyed laws different from those of other men. Where he touched, matter yielded. Where he walked, astonishment came first, and admiration never walked alone. Even as a young man, Hercules could already feel that something was wrong with so much strength being born surrounded by silence, fear, and wary eyes. The world saw power in his arms, but he was beginning to realize that the true weight lay in what no one dared say. From above, Zeus watched him grow like a distant sun, too strong to be denied, too distant to be protected. And the more his divine blood awakened, the more Hera's shadow closed over a path that had not yet even begun. Hercules had not yet defeated monsters, kings, or his own destiny, but he already lived surrounded by the sentence of an ancient war. Before proving his strength to the world, he first had to feel in his own name the mark of a guilt that was never his. For Hercules, condemnation came first, and the legend would begin only after pain had learned to walk at his side. The years passed, and the child marked by the gods grew into a man whose strength was too great to seem human. Where other men saw a challenge, Hercules saw only a burden smaller than the one his very nature forced him to carry. His fame began to spread among cities and temples, but every trace of admiration always came mixed with fear that one day he might lose control. Behind the strength, however, stood a man trying to find peace in a destiny that had never allowed him to be born in silence. Hercules wanted to live like an ordinary man, build a home, protect his own, and leave the divine war outside his door. But high above on Olympus, Hera did not forget, and time only sharpened the patience of her vengeance. The goddess did not need to send monsters that night, because sometimes the cruelest punishment is born within the mind itself. When darkness fell upon Hercules' house, even the air seemed too heavy, as if reason itself were being torn out of the world. What his eyes saw no longer obeyed truth, and shadows began to take the shape of threats where shelter had once stood. In that moment, the strength that made him legendary stopped protecting him and began obeying the faceless chaos sent down from the heavens. When the madness passed, no battle remained, no enemy, only a silence so heavy it seemed greater than death itself. Hercules looked around and understood without words that the punishment of the gods had used his own hands against his life. No monster had defeated him, and yet he was ruined within as if he had lost a war against himself. Greece heard the news as though hearing the collapse of a temple, for the most admired strength in the world now seemed the most dangerous as well. The hero whose legend had not yet even begun already carried on his shoulders a guilt too heavy to fit inside any ordinary forgiveness. Unable to find rest among men, Hercules climbed toward the sacred in search of an answer, like a man seeking air after drowning in his own fate. In the temple, he found no comfort, only the certainty that his pain would still be shaped into servitude before it could ever become redemption. The gods' answer offered him no glory, only a command: bow, obey, and pay in life for the weight of his own strength. Hercules, born with strength enough to crush walls, would now have to serve a lesser king as if he were no more than another man living under another's order. It was not chains of iron that bound him, but an invisible sentence, harsh enough to bend even a son of Zeus. From above, Zeus remained silent, for even the king of the gods seemed unable to undo what Hera's pride had sown. Hera, however, saw in that submission the beginning of the humiliation she had always desired, never realizing she was shaping something greater than her own hatred. Before that sentence, Hercules did not roar, did not flee, and did not beg, because some pains drag a man so deep into darkness that all he can do is keep moving. That was how the greatness of Hercules truly began, not in triumph, but in the moment he accepted carrying his own condemnation. Before proving his strength to the world, Hercules had to accept that his first battle would be to remain standing beneath the weight of a guilt imposed by the gods. When he arrived before the king he was meant to serve, Hercules understood that the gods' humiliation had only just begun. The command brought no forgiveness, only the first, impossible task, as if his guilt needed to be crushed by something greater than a man. His first destination was Nemea, where a monstrous lion had already turned fields, stones, and roads into a kingdom of fear. Along the way, Hercules saw the silence of the villages and realized that even the land itself seemed to recoil before that creature. There were no screams and no battle in sight, only deep marks in stone and wood, as a warning that the strength there was too brutal for ordinary weapons. When he entered the hills of Nemea, Hercules felt that the hunt was not his alone, because the monster was already watching him. The lion appeared not as a common beast, but as a living wall of muscle, shadow, and fury, too immense to seem natural. Hercules hurled his strength against it from afar, but quickly discovered that its hide rejected iron, arrows, and everything that should have been enough. Then he understood that the battle would not be won with weapons, but with his own body, as if fate itself wished to measure strength against strength. The monster retreated into the rock, and Hercules followed it into the cave like a man willing to step alive into the center of his own trial. Inside, there was no room for escape, only stones sealing off the world and two massive bodies struggling to decide who would emerge whole from the dark. Every blow from the lion made the rock tremble, but each time Hercules endured, the cave itself seemed to recognize a force even greater. When Hercules' arms finally closed for good, the battle ceased to be chaos and became a sentence, slow and inevitable as a stone gate grinding shut. At dawn, Nemea no longer belonged to fear, for the condemned man emerged from the darkness, carrying the impossible proof of his own victory. For the first time, Hercules' strength no longer seemed like a curse without direction, but like a hard enough tool to open a way where no one else could pass. When he returned to the palace bearing the symbol of the defeated beast, even the corridors seemed too small to contain the weight of that arrival. The king who had sent him to die saw Hercules standing once again, and fear changed shape before a man beginning to overcome his own sentence. But that first victory did not bring him freedom, because the gods were still collecting, step by step, the pain they had poured over his life. From above, Hera watched the hero survive once again, and her wrath had to accept that destroying Hercules would be harder than condemning him. Zeus watched him too in silence, because within that disciplined strength, something was already being born that not even Olympus would be able to erase. Along the roads of Greece, the name of Hercules began to change its weight, no longer sounding only like guilt, but beginning to take the shape of legend. He still carried pain, guilt, and servitude, but for the first time those shadows no longer walked alone at his side. For in defeating the first impossible thing, Hercules discovered that his strength did not exist only to destroy, but also to cross what seemed impossible to overcome. The condemnation remained, but now the whole world could already see that within it, a hero too difficult to break was being born. Hercules was condemned before he ever proved his strength, and perhaps that is why he became a legend, because he had to be born a hero from within his own ruin. If you love mythology, mystery, and epic storytelling, this channel was made for you. Subscribe now.